Welcome. My name is Allison Lauer, Executive Director of the Florida Kiwanis Foundation. Thank you for joining us tonight for our third Jubilee webinar focusing on Young Children Priority 1. We hope everyone is safe after last week's storm, and we're excited to be with you all tonight. Tonight's webinar will be recorded, and all 4 recordings will be available at the end of the month for your review at your convenience. This webinar series is in conjunction with the Florida Kiwanis Foundation's 50th anniversary, and we're delighted to have offered the special viewing of No Small Matter. For our audience who has not yet been able to join us, we are honored to have Dr. Will and Rachel Bleckman be our hosts for our webinar. Many of you have followed the Bleckmans' lifetime of great service, and Kiwanians truly need no introduction to them. The Bleckmans have served our great state of Florida, our nation, and our international community for over 30 years, with countless acts of leadership. Dr. Will served as the president of Kiwanis International in 1990 through 1991, introducing the program Young Children Priority 1 and chairing the International Young Children Priority 1 Committee. Rachel was an active participant in Young Children Priority 1, organizing a partnership between Head Start and Reading is Fundamental, in which the wives of Kiwanis governors participated. Some of these literacy programs have been in operation for the past 30 years. The Bleckmans' lifelong passion for education, advocacy, and research of childhood development has revolutionized the way Kiwanians view these early years. Now, without any further delay, I would like to turn the program over to Rachel Bleckman to begin today's webinar.
Thank you, Allie, and thanks again to the Foundation for establishing the Will and Rachel Bleckman Fund, which makes education, programming, and advocacy for young children its priority 1. Will is so sorry that due to his illness, he's not been able to participate, but he's listened to all these sessions and joins me in thanking everyone who has made these possible. The Florida Foundation, our expert speakers, and the volunteers behind the scenes. These sessions have highlighted the importance of the early years and perhaps inspired those watching to develop programs, advocate, and spread the word. We appreciate it. Tonight is the third in our 4-part series on early childhood. In webinar 1, Rebecca Parlakian and Dr. Peter Gorski schooled us in the importance of the ages 0 to 5 and the ultimate health and well-being of the individual. In webinar 2, Rachel Giannini and Dr. Phyllis Calefe discussed the importance of and the issues related to quality early education. Tonight, we'll turn our attention to policy and practice, the steps needed. We're fortunate indeed to have Dr. Mimi Graham, Director of FSU Center for Prevention and Early Intervention Policy, whose focus, talent, and pioneering action have resulted in a career filled with accomplishments on behalf of young children. These include leading a statewide infant mental health movement and the co-founding of the Florida Association for Infant Mental Health, partnering with the Florida Office of the Court to found Florida's early childhood courts, known as baby courts, and spearheading a national think tank and subsequent book, Creating a Trauma-Informed State. Dr. Graham is the recipient of many awards, and best of all, she's our guest tonight. Also with us is Zackary Gibson, who is the Chief Child Advocate and Director of the Office of Adoption and Child Protection for the state of Florida. Mr. Gibson has held numerous public and private positions in Florida and Texas, overseeing efforts with children of all ages. With his unique perspective, he's in a position to broaden our view of practice, and we appreciate his participation. Please put your questions for Dr. Graham and Mr. Gibson in the chat on your screen, and we'll get to as many as time permits. So we're ready to begin. Mr. Gibson, your perspective of what we need to know in the state of Florida. Please tell us.
Good evening, everyone. What an honor it is to join you all today. I want to express thanks and appreciation certainly to Dr. Will and Rachel Bleckman, to the Florida Kiwanis Foundation, to Allie Lawler, and to my friend Dr. Mimi Graham for this opportunity to join you today. I'm excited to share information, and so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to get things started. All right. So again, good evening. Thank you again for the opportunity. We're here to talk about what steps are needed for optimal early childhood development. And as I thought about this topic, it made me think a lot about some basic elements that I'd like to share with you today from the perspective that I have coming from the governor's office. My work focuses a lot on child protection, certainly promoting permanency. And as I look at it through that lens, I'm going to share some visuals with you today to hopefully get us all seeing things from a similar lens that can hopefully help guide our discussion today, but more importantly, guide your discussions as you have with your colleagues in your communities so that we can be seeing things from a similar lens, but more importantly, continue to promoting action on behalf of Florida's children. So it's exciting to be here. And I think what's unique to all of this is that we all care for young children, right? We're all here today because we recognize they are priority one. And we're so thankful again for the leadership of the Florida Kiwanis Foundation for hosting this, and certainly to Dr. Will and Rachel Bleckman. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is prevention, right? A lot of the work of my office focuses on prevention. And certainly I'm not going to belabor the point because we could sit here all night and talk about risk factors, right? Hopefully many of you are familiar with this visual. If you're not, again, this is the pair of ACEs, right? Where we talk about adverse childhood experiences. I was talking about what are we trying to prevent? And again, we could sit here all night to talk about risk factors and the various things that prevent children from being ready to learn when they come to school. And certainly looking at it both from the child's perspective, but also from the parent's perspective, right? How do we support both in ensuring that children have the greatest opportunity to not only be ready to learn to achieve, but that we are promoting their health, safety, and well-being. So again, these are some things that we are trying to prevent. Transitioning from what are the risks that we're trying to address, I wanted to share this model with you. So as I look at things, we all see different research, different science that's out there. And this image really captured my attention because I think it embodies a variety of different things. So what this represents is an image that was created through the Department of Health in our state, and it takes the concepts from the social ecological model, a framework for prevention that was created by the CDC, and then it integrates also the work the Department of Health has done related to Florida's life course. And so the image to the right that you see are the 4 levels of the social ecological model. In red there, you'll see societal, community, relationship, and individual. And then of course you see the life course. And, we look at it from prenatal through later adulthood. And then when we think about it from a children's perspective, we really are looking at things from a perspective of prenatal through the successful transition to adulthood, right? We want children to graduate, to be able to transition to adulthood successfully. And as they do that, certainly, we want them to become productive and self-sufficient. And as we are looking from the beginning at the prenatal level, as we look at this social ecological model, again, there are things that we do at the societal level, which are at the federal or maybe even state level, working down into our communities. And when we talk about communities, that can cover the span of region, of judicial circuit, of county, of cities, of neighborhoods. But the most important piece to that is at the relationship level, right? So when we talk about the work we're doing, we have to always remember, well, who's at that relationship level that's directly interfacing and connecting with the individual to build upon their knowledge, their awareness, and their abilities to overcome challenges, to work through whatever barriers may be out there, but more importantly, promote the health, safety, and well-being of their children. So this is an image that I like a lot, that I'd like to share with you. I provided some links here. So if you get a copy of this, please consider reviewing this. And again, this is all about creating and setting the structure, right? Creating the infrastructure from the state down to the individual level. And today I'm going to talk about practice considerations related to the community level as well as the the relationship level, so that we can begin to impact individual behavior. And so when we think of relationships, again, one of the things that comes to my mind is that is the core of everything that we do when it comes to serving others, right? Is developing a professional relationship, working to identify needs, issues, and certainly helping to resolve those issues. And again, no matter what system you may work in, what agency you may work in, if you're in the business of helping people, the common goal for all of us is we want people to become productive and self-sufficient. Let me say that again. The common goal for all of us is we want folks to become productive and self-sufficient. So as government, we don't have to be in your life because you have a support system already involved in your life. You have a community that's there to support you, and certainly a state that identifies policies that my colleague Mimi will talk about, but policies that support continued health, safety, and well-being. So as we talk about that social ecological model and looking at the intersection and the interaction of all four of those levels, what are we trying to address? And I'd like to share with you all social determinants of health. Hopefully it's a term you're all familiar with. And what I have in front of you are the 5 domains of social determinants of health that were identified by Healthy People 2030. And when I look at these domains, certainly I think about all of our state agencies to say, where do they fit along each of these 5 domains? And what's interesting, even through the work of our Children and Youth Cabinet, we have 5 goals that align pretty much directly with these social determinants of health. So there's already work and infrastructure in our state that's already aligned to these things. How do we bring it all together, integrate it, and really begin to think about the collaboration, not only at the state level, but really at the local level, where we can directly connect and build those relationships with individuals to support their efforts? So as I talk about practice considerations, the thing I really want to focus on are protective factors, right? Again, I mentioned earlier on, we can talk about risk factors all day long, but the term protective factors is hopefully not new to you, but for some it may be new. But in our state, we look at 6 protective factors as kind of foundational elements that when these are strong within families, we know that incidents of abuse and neglect go way down, and it can increase healthy development, safety, as well as well-being. So right here, the 6: nurturing attachment, parent resilience, social connections, concrete supports, parent knowledge of parenting and child development, social and emotional competence. From the video, we already heard a little bit about social and emotional competence. I'll talk more about it. And I'm going to highlight a couple of these because in reality, they all intersect with one another. Let's first talk about knowledge of parenting and child development. So when I think about, how do we begin to really think about steps needed for optimal childhood development? I think a lot about education, right? I think a lot about how do we remove the justification that you didn't know, right? Because if you know something, then you have choice in taking action. And I am a firm believer that ever since I came into this role in 2012, when I first heard about adverse childhood experience, that is a topic that I think anybody who's a parent, they need to know about it, right? And I think for us, how do we get that education beyond us as professionals, beyond us as advocates? How do we get that into the community? How do we get it to the public? My good friend, Dr. Graham, has educated me greatly about the impacts of toxic stress and brain development. Another 2 key topics that I feel that the public definitely needs to know more of, and certainly our professionals need to know. When it comes to parenting, how do we ensure they understand developmental expectations, right? I think about it, it's interesting before I had a child, I remember trying to give advice to parents around parenting and realize I had no clue, right? And until I experienced it myself as a parent, did I really realize how important protective factors are, but certainly too around developmental expectations, because as for many of us, we assume, right? We assume people know certain things. And if we always approach it in that light, we may never be satisfied, right? Another key important topic that I think is important around education is nurturing behaviors, right? What is that? What is that? And what does it look like? And how can we offer intentional practice to help our families put that knowledge into practice? I think it's such a key piece, as well as early identification and interventions. we do a lot of training through our professionals around a variety of different topics, but sometimes that training goes in one ear and out the other. But how does that remain with us? And so as we're working with children and certainly with their families, when we begin to see things, are we able to take action and ask questions? And I think that's key, because that can open the door for potential supports or interventions that may be needed. And so when we think about practice considerations, certainly from the professional realm, how do we build all of this information within our professional development curriculum? I think it's such a key piece to everything that we're doing. There's been a lot of great work across our state. Rachel mentioned it earlier around Mimi's efforts around creating a trauma-informed state. I'm proud to have been a part of that as well, to support her efforts. But this is something that we hope communities across our state will consider, starting their own trauma-informed community, building a coalition of folks, both at the professional level as well as from the community level, who are knowledgeable of this education, of these educational topics that we talked about, but are willing to provide that to others, right? I think we have opportunities to do that. And again, it's all based upon relationships. And so many times this is no cost, but with high impacts that we can achieve great things. Another area where I think when we think of practice considerations is, a lot of our early learning centers, they do a lot of parent involvement activities. And how can we partner with them to further offer education on some of these key topics, so that we can, again, remove the justification that you didn't know, but more importantly, that we can not only create the awareness of these topics, but we can create empowerment on what actions can be taken. And last but not least is public awareness, right? We focus on a variety of different topics throughout the state. Public awareness is a key opportunity for us to raise awareness around key issues, but really begin to speak on what actions can we take. So if you look at the visual to the right, this is kind of the component associated with protective factors, right? Protective factors are external elements that, when strong in families, can strengthen their internal protective capacities. So I wanted to share this with you because we think about protective capacities from a behavioral, cognitive, and emotional, thank you, perspective, right? So that we are building that capacity. And certainly if there's any child welfare involvement that may be involved with the family, a part of the assessment involves an assessment of a parent's protective capacities. We need to build protective capacities amongst our families. And again, these practice considerations are avenues in which we can begin to do that. The next protective factor I want to talk about are social connections. I think it's self-describing what we're talking about here, but at the core, it's positive relationships, right? Emotional support, instrumental support, informational support, and spiritual support. And there's many different other examples than what I have here, but it's all of us, banding together and lifting each other up, right? And for many of us as professionals, as we look at the practice considerations, when families come to us or kids come to us with these challenges or issues, the question becomes is who's going to serve as the champion for that parent or child, right? Are we going to say, oh, just go to that website and look for yourself? Or, you know what, let me call somebody and see if they can help you, right? That's great, but when people are in crisis or distress, a website doesn't always become helpful, right? And making a phone call, unless we're following up with it to provide a warm handoff, may not help that family, overcome their challenges or the complex issues that they may have. So for many times when those situations arise to us, the question we have to ask ourselves is, can we be the champion for that parent and child to help them navigate, to assist them in getting information as well as providing education? The next item I'd like to highlight are support groups. There's so much value in support groups because many times we feel like the issues we may be dealing with, we're the only one dealing with them, right? And as a result, we might become a little more isolated than maybe what we should. But Fortunately for us, there's all kind of support groups out there. I'm sure many of you, if you're familiar with it, you can Google pretty much anything and find a support group. And there are a lot of great support groups throughout the state of Florida that we want to help families connect with. And I think one of the main support groups that we can build is through our parent involvement activities with our early learning centers, right? That our providers create a support group feeling when we invite families to our center to talk about the work that we're doing with their kids, but to also provide them opportunities to communicate with each other, to share knowledge, information, and even strategies on maybe how they are dealing with unique challenges that in reality are common to all of us. But again, as the person going through it, sometimes we feel it's just us. So I think support groups are another easy way of integrating it within our existing infrastructure to provide a platform for families to talk with one another and share ideas, strategies, and ways to overcome challenges. The last one I wanted to highlight is something that's really growing in our state. Our governor has launched the governor's faith and community-based initiative. So I'm talking about faith-based partnerships, right? I think many of us across the state and in our different organizations, we have recognized that we walk in parallel fashion, because both government and faith institutions, we're all both charged to serve the people. So how do we find the common ground that enables us to do that effectively, but more importantly, creating the win for the families that we serve? That is our goal. And certainly through these faith-based partnerships, how can they also be that support system or that support group for that family? So if the state is involved, when we're ready to step out, that family has another group or support system that they can lean on that can help them through their challenges, so that the state does not have to be back in that person's life. And again, the image that you see there is reaching the top, but it takes all of us working together to get to the top. Concrete supports, I think, is another critical element as it relates to the protective factors framework, but more importantly, helping and addressing family and child's needs to ask and accept help. We know there's so much stigma out there about asking for help. And again, how do we begin breaking down that stigma? It's by talking to each other. It's by building professional relationships with the families and the children we serve, and talking to them about what challenges they may have, and being able to empathize with them, but also potentially even say, hey, would you be open if I could introduce somebody to you that maybe is dealing with something similar to what you're dealing with, right? Opening the door where we can begin to better support families in asking for help, but also for them to accept that help. I think another key piece is reducing stress, right? We all know what we're like when we're stressed out. It's not pretty, right? And nobody wants to feel stressed out. But many times the families that we may be serving are dealing with a lot that we have no clue to what's going on. So how can we open the door to be able to ask the right question, to get information that we can begin identifying opportunities to support these families in ways that can reduce stress? And I think the other key piece too is eliminating barriers, right? We know that there's, with any funding stream that's out there, there's always criteria that is associated with those funding streams. Income eligibility, certain age groups are eligible, so on and so forth, right? How can we begin to remove some of those barriers? And when we think of practice considerations, I wanted to really highlight the first one around health insurance. I can't speak enough how important health insurance is. And as we know, with the talk happening around mental health, health insurance plays such a critical role in that. And it's beyond just the physical health that we're talking about. We're really also talking about their mental and behavioral health as well. And I know there's a lot of efforts in our states to work with pediatricians, with family physicians, to really begin talking more about the mental health side, to enable them to effectively make referrals for service, as well as provide necessary documentation to justify medical necessity if it is needed. Another key thing that I think is important for all of us are the different resource directories that are out there. Many of us are very familiar with the 211 network. What a great service that they provide. They do some amazing stuff. They've got all kind of information supports, crisis supports. But in addition to that, the state has also come out with a new resource directory. It's My Florida, My Family. For those that are unfamiliar with it, please visit myfloridamyfamily.com. Take an opportunity to enter your zip code, say that you need help, enter your zip code and see the information that's available. We've been working very hard to populate that resource directory. And none of these resource directories are really in competition with one another. If anything, they all complement one another, because if I can't find what I'm looking for from one site, my hope is that I can find it through another site. But we've got a lot of resource directories out there. Why is this important to you? Because many times we might be all right, but we encounter others that may need some help. And our knowledge and awareness of these different resource directories can provide us the opportunity to provide a lifeline to somebody else who's in need that can help them get information, get resources, get services that can help them overcome their challenges. As we heard in the introduction of Mimi, big player in the infant mental health world. And I tell you, man, we know that that's an important piece. Our Office of Early Learning has been doing some amazing work through their preschool development grant, really focusing on infant mental health. So from a systems perspective, we need to continue to grow that. There's efforts now, training available through the Florida State University, through their College of Social Work around social and emotional learning. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But again, great information. And looking down to the next one is the early childhood court, right? So when we talk about systems involved youth, when we talk about our youngest children, this early childhood court, I'm telling you all, it's amazing work that's taking place, because we're no longer playing he said, she said in court. We have a court facilitator that's getting the information, that's holding the service providers accountable and bringing that to the judge in order to help them make the best decision around the safety and well-being of kids, right? Reducing the amount of time kids are remaining in care, increasing permanency for children, two critical pieces to what we are trying to do within our foster care system. And the early childhood court process has been absolutely phenomenal at supporting that. So if you don't have an early childhood court in your community, by God, please call Mamie, please call me. We would love to talk to you and help you get something going there. The last item I wanted to highlight is somewhat of a new initiative for many of you. It's called Handle with Care. The website is handlewithcarefl.com. .org. It's handlewithcarefl.org. If you're not familiar with it, basically what it is, it's a partnership between law enforcement and the schools and early learning centers, where anytime law enforcement is called to respond on scene and children are present and may have been exposed to violence or trauma, they provide a notification to the school or early learning center that says, Zach needs to be handled with care. That's all they communicate. And the whole premise of Handle with Care is to provide a heads up. And so if I could ask all of you through the chat, who of you would appreciate a heads up on stuff, right? I think many of you would respond by saying, yes, we would like a heads up. Handle with Care is an avenue that enables us to be a little more proactive in recognizing kids that may have some challenges, but more importantly, that we're getting a heads up so that we can observe, we can monitor them, and if needed, begin to offer additional service and support, and if needed, interventions to help them remain successful within school, but more importantly, be ready to learn, which is at the core of our work. The last item I think I'm going to be talking about here is social and emotional competence. We're talking about family and community interactions that help children be able to communicate clearly, effectively, recognize and regulate their emotions, establish and maintain relationships. So that term relationship keeps coming up throughout all of this, because again, that's at the core of the work that we're trying to do, working with our children, building those relationships with our kids, but more importantly, building the relationship with the family, right? Because collectively and together, we can make tremendous impact in the healthy development of our children. And we do that through relationships. So what are we talking about here? Trauma-informed care. Again, you know, our trauma-informed communities that are already in place across the state are doing some amazing work, doing public education, partnering with our schools, partnering with our early learning centers. We need to keep building that up. And I think, again, in addition to the education we offer, how are we also providing intentional practice of these concepts, right? So when we offer education about how, you know, what something is, how do we then intentionally provide some practice where they can take that knowledge and begin to apply it in a more controlled environment so that they can learn, right? That's at the core of what we try to do for kids. But you know what, as parents, we need that too, right? Because parenting is certainly part experience, but the other part is all about learning. And we need that practice in order to be successful in doing the work that we do. And again, I can't highlight enough our parental involvement activities, right? We know families are going to be coming to school. We know we want more of them to come to school. So how are we enticing them? And again, can we entice them maybe through food, right, as one avenue, but can we entice them through the communication and collaboration and support that other families can provide to them? I think there are great opportunities through parent involvement activities where we can really make some great inroads in serving and supporting families. So I've highlighted these 6 protective factors. Again, nurturing attachment embedded with all of them. The last protective factor that I didn't speak to individually was around parent resilience, right? And everything that we're doing is all about building resilience. So I come back to the ecological model of health, right? Societal, community, relationship, and individual. So I talked a lot about at the community level, what are things that we can do, but also at the relationship level, how are we making those connections to support individuals, to inform their behaviors, to support them, and if they're parents, certainly to support the optimal healthy development of their children. So as I talk about it, I'm now getting ready to pass to my colleague Mimi, who's going to focus more here around the societal level, particularly at the state level, to talk about policy considerations. Mimi?
So I'd like to talk about policy. And I'd like to start out with the Marshmallow Test. And this is a very famous test that was done in the 60s, and it kind of sets the stage for what we're going to talk about tonight. So it's one of my favorites. Hope you'll enjoy it.
This is a bell, okay? Yes. And you know, the bring me back bell.
It's called the Marshmallow Test.
In this side of the plate, we will put 1 marshmallow.
These studies were first done with youngsters who were in the Stanford preschool when I was teaching at Stanford in the late 1960s and in the 1970s. We tried to set up situations in which young children
2 marshmallows.
make a choice between, 2 of something that you prefer later or 1 of something that you prefer a little less now.
If you had to choose, would you like to have 1 marshmallow?
Yeah.
Or would you like to have 2 marshmallows? Which one would you like? The 2.
The whole point of the experiment is to set up an intense conflict between the 2.
Now here's how we play this game. I'm gonna leave the room while I'm gone. If you can stay here and wait for me to come back without eating the marshmallows, then you get 2 marshmallows. Okay. But if you don't want to wait, you can make me come back right away. The bell. By pressing the bell. But then you get 1 marshmallow, not 2 marshmallows. I won't ring the bell. You won't ring the bell? Okay.
The conflict for the child is very heavy, is that about half will go one way and half will go the other.
Oh, you made me come back.
The kids who know how to do this are superb at it, and it's quite wonderful to watch them doing it.
Can I do it? Take it here for a while.
The longer they were able to wait at age 4, the better the ratings of their ability to control themselves and to pursue their academic and other goals.
Please come back.
The kids who are able to delay gratification are increasingly learning ways of managing frustration, ways of managing distress. In middle life, there's less drug use, higher educational level attainment, much less likely to have lowered self-esteem, to engage in bullying behavior with other people. The correlations are clearly statistically significant, but that in no way means that a youngster who at age 4 didn't wait a long time is in any way doomed. It's like a little window into willpower, a tiny window into ways of not making responses automatic and not having the world do with us what it wants to do, but us doing something to also change the world and what we do with it.
So in this video, we found that the kids who waited longer, they had lots of different strategies for self-control. They hid their hands behind their back. They looked at the ceiling. They did everything but look at the marshmallows. And they were much more likely to thrive later, both academically and behaviorally, and they had better life outcomes. And they had the willpower to delay the immediate gratification in order to get double of what they wanted. So this is really Florida's marshmallow test. And that is, are we going to take the one sugar high now of things that are shiny objects that we want to do, or do we have the willpower to invest in our future and our policies? We know the science is compelling, and you've heard from many of our colleagues over this series about the early childhood science and the trauma science and the resilience science. The needs compelling. All you have to do is talk to 0 to 3 and look at the state of babies or look at the kids count data, and our kids are not thriving. You also know that economists agree that the best rate of return comes from investing as early as possible. We know that early childhood is a really good investment. It's good for education, it's good for business, it's good for families, it's good for taxpayers. And yet there's this huge disconnect between the timing of public spending and peak brain development. For example, the legislature just put $200 million in reading for third graders, and yet 90% of the brain is developed by age 5. And so we really need to look at where these investments are. And the first 1,000 days, that time from conception to age 3, is the best chance to turn things around. A couple of years ago, Wansley Walters was head of the Florida Children and Youth Cabinet. She said, there is not a single serious human service crisis, including crime and incarceration, that could not be averted or improved by an emphasis on the first 1,000 days of life. And we all have a role in promoting that. And in Kiwanis, you all have done an outstanding job, inspired by our Dr. Will, whether it was the baby shower or the immunizations or all the wonderful work that you do. But we all have a role in promoting early childhood. And so we'd like to invite you to really focus on those first 1,000 days. We have a group in Florida called the First 1,000 Days Florida, and we're really coming together to really focus on that pivotal time of development, and would love to have your support. We have 5 policy recommendations. I'd like to share them with you very quickly. The first is to expand affordable, accessible, high quality infant toddler care. 62% of Florida moms have a baby in the 62% of mothers in the labor force have a baby, and yet infant care is almost impossible to find. And if you can find it, it's really unavailable. We have thousands of kids on the waiting list. So the opportunity is that we increase quality, so it's not just babysitting, and that we increase the infant reimbursement rate so we can provide quality. And some of our colleagues are linking, because we know how important high quality infant toddler care is, they're linking high-risk kids, they're geo-mapping where are the high-risk kids and where's the high-quality childcare, and then linking those together. And we need to do more of those things. The second policy is to expand the eligibility and the impact of early intervention. And yet only, we know those first few years are really optimal, and yet only about a quarter of our kids get a developmental screening, and then only about 2% get early intervention. So Kiwanis could certainly do a lot to help improve the screening rates to ensure early intervention, not late intervention. The third policy recommendation is that to ensure that our expectant families and new families have a medical home, and so we can promote utilization of mental health services. We know that about 18% of moms report less than optimal mental health. That's a real problem. And almost 15% of Florida moms have depression. And guess what? Dads have depression too. And it negatively impacts the baby and the family. Florida has not joined the rest of the states that are reimbursing for depression, maternal and family depression. We also need to make sure that we have access to family planning so that families can decide what is the optimal time to have a baby. Over 50% of babies are not planned, and we know that we need to do a better job for that, as well as screening for depression and really investing in a mental health workforce. We don't have nearly enough mental health folks to meet the need. And with COVID, we understand now that like 4 in 10 people were suffering from depression. So the opportunity is that only less than half of moms and babies have a medical home. So the Florida legislature this year did pass Medicaid expansion through the first year of life, which is really important because then parents that are depressed can get treatment, and those families that have drug problems can get treatment along with the baby. The fourth policy recommendation is strengthening families in child welfare through early childhood court. And I have we know that if we don't address those adverse childhood experiences, that they only manifest in a multitude of societal problems later, like addictions and maltreatment. We also know that babies under their first birthday are the largest age group coming into child welfare, and that the brain, the developing brain, is the most vulnerable in those first 1,000 days of life. And we also know that there's this cycle. And if for kids who are abused and neglected, they come into the courts and then they become parents that are abusing and neglecting their own children. So we need to stop that multi-generational cycle. And one of the ways is to expand our early childhood court. I have a short 2-minute video here about early childhood court so you can see what it is.
It was 2018, yes, is when it happened, October 2018.
2018 DP 127 in the interest of Marley and Charlie Jones for status of early childhood court.
They had to mention, I think, one time about the kids being placed somewhere permanently, and I was like, oh, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to let that happen. I couldn't let them down. Intensive outpatient treatment I did twice a week for 4 hours. I just pretty much had to learn how to get my independence, and I got sober.
Tell me how things are going.
I'm engaging in all my IOPs, passing my UAs, staying sober.
We are recommending overnight visitation.
Nice work.
Thank you.
You did this.
The early childhood court, I have to say that it's a very good program. They helped me get to where I am now. The whole team was awesome, working with them, from the caseworker to the judge. He watched me grow, and he watched me become what I needed to be to do for my babies.
It's been a privilege serving you. I can't wait to hear about the next good thing you have in your life. What's your new job?
I'm a receptionist at Trident Marine.
That's fantastic.
He told me I should be I'm a poster mom inspiration, I believe, to childhood court is what he told me. They don't want you to lose your kids. They don't want to rip families apart. You know, they really try to put them back together. People don't see that.
We have seen so many healed relationships. It's really the judicial leadership, the community coordinator, and the child parent psychotherapy.
Many parents don't have that understanding of being held.
That's okay. We will work with that and move forward from that.
She tried her hardest and fought through the whole thing and never gave up.
Anybody can do it. You just got to really want it, especially for the babies. You have to do it for the babies. You have to.
She continues to just thrive, and she's just a different person than she used to be, and it's awesome.
We do want to congratulate the mother. She has done so well and really stepped up to the plate.
I was honest with them about everything, from using to relapse. Just be honest, and they will help. And they help me every step of the way. I have my own place. They help me get that. And I have a full-time job.
That's just a little thing. And we also know that it saves money. So it's a win-win-win. The fourth policy recommendation quickly is about mitigating climate change. The Academy of Pediatrics has a new policy statement out of how the climate change is causing food insecurity and causing such mass migration for families and poor air quality and health problems. And it's a huge threat. And so we can do a lot to help mitigate the effects on children. And so let's work together to leave the world a better, healthier, safer place and give our children a better, healthier, safer future. And let's take on Florida's Marshmallow Test. And will we have the political willpower necessary to invest in the policies that we know will strengthen Florida's families? We invite you to join us. Dr. Will got Dr. Nelson Adams and several others, and we'd love you to join us for this. But there's a lot that you all can continue to do. Your amazing work that Kiwanis has done in serving kids. You can invite elected officials to your meetings so you can discuss the needs of infants and toddlers based on the compelling science. You can advocate for affordable, high quality childcare and mental health for new and expectant families. You can nudge them to expand universal screening so we can identify delays and ensure early intervention. You can insist that they pursue renewable energy and buffer any of the climate change threats that are going to threaten their children, and seek their support so we can expand early childhood court for all kids. And we are so thrilled with the Will and Rachel Blackman Fund, and that they have made young children a priority in Kiwanis and in our state. And we believe that that is priceless. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share tonight.
Thank you so much, Mimi and Zach, for this wonderful presentation, full of issues, full of frustrations, but full of direction. And we love that. And we love the fact that you've made so many wonderful suggestions. I wonder if you were to look at the whole problem, it seems to rest on the fact that people are not aware of the importance of the early years. The people who make the policy, the people who teach the children, the people, how do we cope with that problem? Do you ever consider getting it in the curriculum of schools so that all children can be educated about this? What do you think are the possibilities here? First, Mimi, how about you?
Yes, I mean, and at FSU at the university level, we are talking about a trauma curriculum that would be in the law school, the med school, social work school, so that everybody graduates understanding the importance of trauma and the cycle of adverse childhood experiences. And I think the way we develop this is just like Dr. Will has shown us. And I don't know anybody that has been more of an advocate across their lifespan of talking about the brain science anytime he could with anybody, anywhere. And I think that's what we need to replicate, Dr. Will, if that would even be possible, you know, and his enthusiasm and really taking opportunities to get Kiwanians and folks really knowledgeable, because when you know the science, when you understand how important those first 5 years are, you know, then you make really different decisions. So I think if we can bottle his enthusiasm and spread it throughout not only Kiwanis, but our world, that's how we would change.
Zach?
I thank you. Yes, thank you, Rachel. I can't agree with Mimi more. I think each of us has a bottle of energy that Will has, right? And we just need to find that and let that come out. I agree that there's opportunities to take concepts of the adverse childhood experience and begin educating our young children about it, our high schoolers, right? Getting them to prepare. In addition to the university courses that Mimi talked about, there's some other university courses looking at abuse and neglect, and really trying to have adult conversations with kids who've never had an adult conversation about issues before, right? We're all, based upon what major we may study, many of the majors and work that we do involve interpersonal communications and interactions, right? And if we know that's the case, how can we best prepare our youth to be successful at having that? We know now, and as a parent of a 13-year-old daughter, all she likes to do is text everybody, right? I mean, we all see it. And I force her to call the pizza shop, and I say, place the order and talk to the person, right? I want her to develop those skills. We need to get our kids not only developing their skills, but informing them with this knowledge to help them make better decisions in the future, for sure.
Well, you've emphasized relationships so much, and you've had that Maslow's needs up there. It's kind of easy to see what you could do about the physical needs. You can always find ways to address those. But how can you get individual parents and individual families to address those psychological needs? And how do we go about helping them to form a more commodious, helpful environment for a child to grow in?
I think first and foremost, it's identifying who are they already connected with, right? Many of us don't have the relationship with these folks. So we need to find out who are they already connected with, and can we build a relationship with those folks in order to connect with the families who may be in need. It's not easy, let alone just walking up to somebody and saying, hey, I'm here to help you. Are you open for help? Unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. There's a lot more to it, but I think we have to have the motivation to want to build these relationships and identify where opportunities are so that we can take advantage of those and be able to make those connections.
Mimi, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yes, I think it's like the family you saw in the video for early childhood court. A lot of families grew up with adverse childhood. Their parents were not there for them. They grew up in rehab with their mother. They don't know how to be a parent. And so I think when you understand the cycle of trauma, and that these parents are just wounded, children, and if we heal their trauma, then they don't need to do the drugs. They can get clean and sober, and they can be good parents, but it takes a lot of hand-holding and a lot of services.
Well, we can't tell you how much we appreciate the wisdom that both of you have imparted to us tonight. We really have gotten a good view of what's going on. And as I said, it's both frustrating and inspiring. And we thank you for all the wonderful suggestions that you've made. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Allie and the Florida Foundation.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, good evening. Thank you so much, Rachel, for hosting tonight's webinar. And Dr. Mimi and Zach, we are just so thrilled to have had you tonight. Thank you for taking the time to educate us and share. We look forward to sharing the links that you mentioned and this presentation with our community at a later date through the recording. So thank you all for joining us tonight. This will be available at the end of the month, and we look forward to seeing everyone next Wednesday at 7 p.m. for our last webinar. So thank you all again, and have a great evening.